Story number 1. Whispers in White. I've always believed that the night holds secrets too dark for the daylight to unveil. As a police officer patrolling the quiet streets of San Fernando, Philippines, my nights were usually uneventful, until that fateful evening in late October 2015. It was around 2 a.m. when the ordinary transformed into the extraordinary, plunging me into a nightmare that blurred the lines between reality and the supernatural. The air was thick with humidity, the remnants of a passing storm leaving the streets slick and the trees swaying gently in the breeze. My cruiser's headlights cut through the darkness as I navigated the familiar routes. The rhythmic hum of the engine, a constant companion in the solitude of night patrol. San Fernando was a peaceful town, its nights serene and rarely disturbed by anything more than the occasional stray animal or late-night reveler. But that night felt different. There was an unsettling stillness, an almost palpable tension hanging in the air. As I drove past the old municipal park, memories of childhood summers spent there flickered in my mind. Children laughing, families picnicking under the starlit sky. Now, it was just shadows and silence. The playground equipment abandoned to the elements. It was near the intersection of Rizal Avenue and Mabini Street when I first saw her. A solitary figure standing on the side of the road, her silhouette stark against the dimly lit street lamp. She was dressed entirely in white, her long dress flowing gracefully in the night wind. At first glance, she seemed out of place, as if she had wandered away from a bygone era. My instincts kicked in, and I slowed the cruiser, pulling over to the curb. "Ma'am, are you okay? Do you need any assistance?" I called out through the open window, my voice steady despite the unease gnawing at me. She turned to face me, her back still towards the car. Her hair cascaded down her shoulders, framing a face that was obscured by the darkness. I reached for my flashlight, the beam piercing the night as I tried to get a better look. Her posture was rigid, almost unnatural, as if she were a statue come to life. "Please, help me," I urged, taking a step out of the vehicle. The gravel crunched under my boots as I approached her cautiously. As I drew nearer, the temperature seemed to drop, the air growing colder despite the tropical climate. Her head tilted slightly, and I could swear I heard a faint whisper, her voice barely audible over the distant sounds of the sleeping town. Before I could utter another word, she vanished, disappeared into thin air, leaving me standing alone on the deserted street. My heart pounded in my chest, adrenaline surging through my veins as I stared at the empty space where she had stood moments before. Confusion and fear battled within me, the encounter leaving me shaken to my core. I retreated to my cruiser, the engine idling as I tried to rationalize what I had just witnessed. Maybe it was a trick of the light, a hallucination brought on by fatigue. But the lingering chill and the memory of her sorrowful plea didn't align with any rational explanation. The next morning, I recounted the incident to my colleague, Officer Reyes, over coffee at the station. His expression was a mix of skepticism and concern, the lines around his eyes deepening as I described the mysterious woman in white. "Reyes, I swear it was real. She just disappeared right before my eyes," I insisted, my voice betraying the lingering fear. He leaned back, his fingers steepled thoughtfully. "You know, there have been reports over the years about apparitions around Rizal Avenue. Some say it's the spirit of a woman who lost her child in a car accident back in the 80s. They believe she roams these streets every year on the anniversary of the tragedy, searching for her lost little one." I felt a chill run down my spine. "Do you think what I saw was her?" Reyes nodded slowly. "It's possible. Many locals believe the area is haunted by her spirit. They say she appears to those who are lost or in need of help. But it's more of a tragic presence than anything malevolent." That night, sleep eluded me. The memory of her hollow eyes and the sorrow in her whisper haunted my dreams, a constant reminder of the thin veil between our world and whatever lies beyond. Determined to find answers, I delved into old newspaper archives and spoke with longtime residents who might hold pieces of the puzzle. What I uncovered was a story of heartbreak and unresolved anguish. In October 1985, A young mother named Maria Santos had lost her child in a devastating car crash on Rizal Avenue. The tragedy had left the community in mourning. And over the years, numerous sightings of a woman in white had been reported, each occurrence coinciding with the anniversary of the accident. Maria's spirit, it seemed, was trapped in a cycle of eternal searching, her sorrow binding her to the streets where her nightmare unfolded. Armed with this knowledge, I felt a deeper connection to the apparition I had encountered. It wasn't just a random ghostly encounter. It was Maria's spirit, reaching out through the veil of time, her pain echoing in every silent night. Driven by a mix of duty and compassion, I decided to pay a visit to the spot where the accident had occurred. The road was eerily quiet, the trees standing tall and unyielding against the night sky. As I walked to the old intersection, memories of the stories I had read resurfaced, painting a vivid picture of the tragic event. I set up a small memorial at the site, a simple arrangement of candles and flowers, a gesture of respect and remembrance. Lighting the candles, I whispered a prayer for Maria and her lost child, hoping to offer some solace to a spirit caught in the limbo of her own grief. That night, I returned to my cruiser, feeling a sense of closure I hadn't anticipated. The air was still, the only sounds the distant hum of the city and the gentle rustling of leaves in the breeze. As I drove down Rizal Avenue, a familiar silhouette appeared once more under the street lamp, a figure in white, her form more defined against the light. "Maria," I called out softly, my voice filled with empathy. She turned to face me, her eyes still hollow but now tinged with a hint of gratitude. "Thank you," her whisper carried on the wind, a final farewell that resonated deep within me. Before I could respond, she faded into the night, the chill dissipating as if her presence had lifted the weight of her sorrow. I felt a profound sense of peace settle over me, the haunting presence finally finding the closure it had long sought. In the days that followed, the sightings of Maria Santos ceased, her spirit finally at rest. The town of San Fernando returned to its peaceful routine, the legend of the woman in white becoming a story of compassion and remembrance rather than fear. As for me, the experience left an indelible mark, a reminder of the fragile boundaries between our world and the echoes of the past. Sometimes, when the night is particularly still and the stars shine brightly against the dark sky, I catch a glimpse of a shadowy figure standing on Rizal Avenue, her presence a silent guardian watching over the town. The whispers of her farewell linger in the air, a testament to the enduring power of empathy and the hope that even in the darkest of nights, there is light to guide lost souls home. Story number 2. Echoes from the Trunk. I've always believed that every town holds its own secrets, hidden beneath layers of time and silence. As a police officer in the sleepy outskirts of Guadalajara, Mexico, I'd grown accustomed to the unremarkable rhythms of rural life, late-night patrols, the occasional call about a petty theft, and the rare, unsettling whispers of something beyond our understanding. But nothing could have prepared me for the night the echoes from an old trunk would shatter the tranquility of my routine, pulling me into a nightmare that refused to let go. It was a chilly October evening in 2010, the kind where the cool air bites through your jacket and the sky is painted with strokes of gray. I was on routine patrol, cruising down Highway 45, a desolate stretch of road that cut through the heart of the countryside. The asphalt was slick with a light drizzle, reflecting the dim glow of my cruiser's headlights as I made my way toward the old Hacienda de Los Olivos, a once grand estate now reduced to a dilapidated ruin, its windows boarded up and vines strangling its once proud facade. Reports had come in earlier that evening about a vehicle abandoned near the hacienda. Given the location and the time, I suspected it might be related to a missing person case. A young woman named Isabella Martinez who had vanished 2 weeks prior. The local community was tight-knit, and her disappearance had left everyone on edge. As I approached the coordinates, my cruiser's siren silent against the heavy rainfall, a sense of foreboding settled over me. Parking cautiously by the roadside, I grabbed my flashlight and radio, the beam cutting through the murky darkness as I stepped out into the storm. The rain fell in relentless sheets, the sound of each droplet mingling with the distant rumble of thunder. The vehicle in question was an old sedan, its paint peeling and windows fogged over. The doors were locked, and a thick layer of dust covered the exterior, suggesting it had been abandoned for some time. I walked around the car, my flashlight revealing rusted hinges and broken locks. As I approached the passenger side, a faint sound caught my attention, a soft, rhythmic knocking emanating from the trunk. My heart raced, a mix of adrenaline and fear coursing through my veins. "Hello? Is anyone there?" I called out, my voice barely audible over the pounding rain. There was no response, just the persistent knocking that seemed to grow louder, more insistent. I reached for the trunk latch, my hands trembling slightly as I pulled it open. The flashlight's beam penetrated the darkness inside, revealing an empty space. Confusion washed over me. The knocking should have stopped, but it didn't. Instead, it transformed into a low, mournful tapping that echoed in the empty trunk. Puzzled and uneasy, I stepped back, looking for any sign of movement. The rain had intensified, the windshield of my cruiser now fogged with condensation. I turned to the driver's side, half expecting to see someone hiding, but the seat was empty. "This is suspicious," I muttered to myself, my mind racing with possibilities. Was someone trapped inside? Or was this some elaborate prank? Determined to get to the bottom of it, I decided to take the vehicle back to the station for a closer inspection. The drive was tense, the only sounds the wipers swishing through the heavy rain and my own uneasy breaths. Upon arrival, I notified my superior, Detective Ramirez, about the situation. He was skeptical but agreed to help me investigate further. Inside the station's makeshift inspection area, we opened the trunk again, the flashlight's beam revealing nothing but empty space. Yet, the knocking persisted, now accompanied by a faint whispering that sent chills down my spine. "Help me! Help me!" Ramirez exchanged a worried glance with me. "Did you hear that?" he asked, his voice steady but eyes betraying his concern. I nodded, my hands shaking as I reached for the radio to see if there had been any other reports or messages. To my horror, the system had been silent the entire time. The call hadn't come from dispatch, and there were no logs of any communication. The knocking and whispering seemed to emanate from the very trunk itself, defying any logical explanation. Driven by a mix of duty and fear, we decided to delve deeper into the car's history. Through old records and local inquiries, we uncovered a chilling connection. The sedan had been involved in a brutal murder 3 years earlier. Isabella Martinez's friend, Laura Hernandez, had been found dead in the same trunk, her body mutilated in a way that suggested a ritualistic intent. The case had gone cold, the perpetrator never found, and rumors of dark forces at play had circulated among the locals. As we pieced together the fragments of the past, a picture of horror began to emerge. Laura had been an avid paranormal investigator, fascinated by the legends surrounding Hacienda de los Olivos. She believed the hacienda was a nexus of supernatural energy, a place where the veil between worlds was thin. Her disappearance and subsequent murder were shrouded in mystery, with some believing she had uncovered something best left hidden. That night, back at the station, the knocking from the trunk escalated into frantic tapping, the whispers growing more urgent. "Find me! Find me!" The air around us grew colder, the temperature dropping abruptly despite the humid climate. Shadows seemed to dance on the walls, flickering in the flashlight's beam like malevolent spirits. Ramirez and I exchanged a glance, our resolve hardening. We had to understand what was happening, to uncover the truth behind Laura's murder and the restless spirit that now sought our help. Armed with more records and a growing sense of dread, we prepared to confront the darkness that had taken hold of the old sedan. Returning to the inspection area, we decided to perform a more thorough search, using advanced equipment to detect any signs of paranormal activity. We set up cameras, EMF detectors, and other instruments designed to capture supernatural phenomena. The night wore on, the storm outside mirroring the turmoil within the station. As midnight approached once again, the knocking intensified, now accompanied by the unmistakable sound of Laura's voice, desperate and pleading. "Help me! Find my peace!" The equipment began to go haywire, cameras flickered, EMF readings spiked, and the air grew thick with an oppressive energy. The flashlight's beam revealed fleeting apparitions, ghostly figures that vanished before our eyes could capture them. It was clear that Laura's spirit was trapped within the trunk, unable to move on until her story was told and justice was served. Determined to free her, we delved into every available detail of her investigation, retracing her steps to Hacienda de los Olivos. The old records, personal journals, and eyewitness accounts painted a picture of a place steeped in dark history and supernatural occurrences. Laura had believed that the hacienda was a gateway to another realm, a place where the living and the dead could communicate. But something had gone horribly wrong. Guided by Laura's journals, we returned to the abandoned hacienda, the site of her final investigation. The storm had passed, leaving the night clear but eerily quiet. The mansion loomed before us, its once grand architecture now crumbling and overgrown with ivy. As we approached, the air grew colder, the oppressive atmosphere weighing down on us like a physical force. Inside, the mansion was a labyrinth of decaying rooms and forgotten memories. We made our way to the attic, the heart of Laura's research. It was there that we found the remnants of her work, books on the occult, artifacts collected from the surrounding area, and the old sedan itself, preserved in a state of eerie stasis. As we opened the trunk, the familiar knocking began, more frantic than ever. Laura's voice echoed through the attic, her sorrow palpable. "Please, help me." Ramirez began to chant the rites outlined in Laura's journals, a series of prayers and invocations meant to honor her spirit and bind the dark forces that had trapped her. The room seemed to pulse with energy, the shadows dancing wildly as the supernatural forces fought against our efforts. Just as we reached the final incantation, a blinding light filled the room, and the trunk began to glow with an otherworldly aura. The knocking ceased, replaced by a serene silence that enveloped us. Laura's apparition stood before us, her expression one of profound peace and gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice now gentle and free of anguish. "I'm free." With those final words, her spirit dissipated, the oppressive energy lifting as the attic returned to its decaying state. The sedan in the trunk was now just an empty shell, devoid of any supernatural presence. We had done it. We had freed Laura's spirit and laid the past to rest. Exhausted but relieved, Ramirez and I left the hacienda, the first rays of dawn breaking over the horizon and casting a warm glow on the desolate landscape. The ordeal had taken its toll, but we had uncovered the truth behind Laura's murder and the restless spirit that had sought our help. In the weeks that followed, the old sedan was removed from our station, its dark history finally acknowledged and put to rest. The townspeople of Red Mesa found solace in knowing that Laura's spirit had been freed, and the legends surrounding Hacienda de los Olivos began to fade, replaced by a newfound respect for the mysteries that lay hidden in the shadows. But sometimes, late at night when the rain taps against the windows and the winds whisper through the trees, I catch a faint echo of Laura's voice, a gentle reminder that some spirits never truly disappear. They linger in the echoes of the past, their stories forever entwined with the lives of those who dare to seek the truth. And as I drive down Highway 45, the memory of that night remains a haunting testament to the thin veil between the living and the dead, and the enduring power of compassion to bridge the chasm between sorrow and peace. Story number 3. Whispers on the Desert Airwaves. I've always found solace in the vastness of Arizona's desert, the endless expanse of sand and scrubland offering a sense of freedom that city life could never match. As a night shift police officer at the small town of Red Mesa, my patrols often took me through these silent, moonlit landscapes. The isolation was both comforting and eerie, a duality that I had grown accustomed to over the years. But nothing could have prepared me for the night that changed everything. A night when the desert whispered secrets that were better left unheard. It was late October 2019, a time when the desert began to transform, the scorching days giving way to chilly nights. My routine was simple: patrol the outer edges of town, keep an eye out for any disturbances, and enjoy the tranquility that only the desert could provide. On this particular night, the sky was clear, the stars twinkling like distant beacons in the inky blackness. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of sagebrush and the distant howl of a coyote. I was cruising down Highway 89, the headlights cutting through the darkness as I made my way toward the old mining trails that led deeper into the wilderness. My radio crackled softly in the background, a constant companion during these solitary shifts. The hum of the engine and the rhythmic beat of my heart were the only sounds keeping me company as I navigated the winding roads. Around midnight, I decided to take a short break, parking my cruiser at a lookout point overlooking the expansive desert. The view was breathtaking, endless dunes rolling under the silver glow of the moon, the silence so profound it was almost tangible. I stepped out of the car, stretching my legs and taking a moment to breathe in the serenity. It was moments like these that made me grateful for the job, despite its inherent dangers. As I sat on the hood of my car, gazing up at the star-studded sky, my radio suddenly emitted a series of static bursts. I frowned, adjusting the volume and tuning the frequency, but all I heard was the familiar crackle of white noise. Shaking off the distraction, I leaned back, closing my eyes and letting the peacefulness of the desert envelop me. But peace was fleeting. A sharp, metallic sound sliced through the silence. A clear, distinct voice coming through the radio. Startled, I reached for the device, trying to make sense of the anomaly. The voice was soft, almost melodic, but carried an unmistakable urgency. "Officer Reynolds! Officer Reynolds!" My heart skipped a beat. I glanced around, the darkness seemingly closing in around me. "This is Red Mesa Police. Do you copy?" I responded, my voice tinged with confusion and unease. Static filled the airwaves, and the voice responded, now whispering, "Find me, find me." I furrowed my brow, pressing the radio against my ear. "Who is this? Where are you?" Silence. The radio fell silent again, the static slowly fading away. I sat in stunned silence, my mind racing to process what had just happened. There were no reports of distress calls from Central Dispatch, and no one else on the frequency had reported anything unusual. I checked the radio system, flipping through channels and verifying that everything was functioning correctly. To my horror, there was no record of the call, no transmission sent or received. It was as if the voice had come from nowhere, a phantom presence in the desert night. A chill ran down my spine, the realization dawning on me that something inexplicable had just occurred. I decided to pack up and head back to the station, the encounter leaving me shaken and questioning my own sanity. As I walked back to my cruiser, the desert seemed to shift around me, the shadows lengthening and the darkness growing thicker. Driving home, I couldn't shake the image of the voice calling my name, the desperate plea that lingered in my mind. The road ahead blurred, the lines on the asphalt merging into a seamless expanse of black and white. My thoughts spiraled, haunted by the possibility that I had encountered something beyond the natural world, a spirit lost in the desert, reaching out for help. The next morning, I recounted the experience to my partner, Officer Martinez, who listened with a mix of skepticism and concern. "Maybe you were just tired, or maybe it was interference from another radio. These things happen sometimes," he suggested, trying to reassure me, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it was more than that. Over the following weeks, the memory of that night gnawed at me, the voice's plea echoing in my thoughts like a haunting refrain. I began researching local legends and historical accounts, desperate to find any clue that could explain the mysterious call. What I discovered was a story of tragedy and loss, buried deep within the annals of Red Mesa's history. Decades earlier, in the late 1960s, a man named Thomas Mitchell had gone missing in the desert. He was an avid hiker and outdoor enthusiast, known for his adventurous spirit and love for the wilderness. On a solitary trek, he vanished without a trace, his disappearance shrouded in mystery. Searches were conducted, but no evidence of his fate was ever found, only whispers of foul play and the unforgiving nature of the desert. Local lore spoke of Thomas as a restless spirit, eternally wandering the desert, his soul unable to find peace. Some believed he had been the victim of a violent accident, while others whispered darker theories of supernatural intervention. The truth remained elusive, his story a ghostly tale told around campfires and in hushed tones by those who dared to delve into the desert's secrets. Armed with this newfound knowledge, I revisited the location of the encounter, hoping to find some connection between the present and the past. The lookout point remained unchanged, the desert vast and silent as ever. I stood there, the memories of that night flooding back, and decided to conduct a thorough investigation, an attempt to bridge the gap between the living and the lost. Days turned into weeks, and my obsession grew. I spent countless hours scouring old records, interviewing locals, and exploring the desert in search of answers. Each step deeper into the wilderness seemed to draw me closer to the truth, but also deeper into the heart of the unknown. The desert, with its harsh beauty and hidden dangers, revealed itself as a place where the veil between worlds was thin, where the echoes of the past lingered like specters in the night. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the desert, I received another transmission on my radio. This time, the voice was clearer, more defined. "Officer Reynolds, help me." My heart raced as I recognized the voice. It was the same pleading tone from before, unmistakably calling my name, determined to uncover the truth and put the restless spirit to rest. I set out once more into the desert, the fading light guiding me toward the unknown. The journey was arduous, the cold biting through my layers of clothing as I navigated the treacherous terrain. Hours passed with no sign of the voice, the desert stretching endlessly around me. Just as I was beginning to lose hope, I stumbled upon a hidden canyon, its walls towering above me, the entrance obscured by shadows and snow. I parked my vehicle at the edge of the canyon, the silence enveloping me like a shroud. Taking a deep breath, I activated my flashlight and made my way down the narrow path, the voice's whispers guiding me deeper into the heart of the canyon. The air grew colder, the darkness pressing in around me, the weight of unseen eyes watching my every move. In the center of the canyon stood an old, abandoned campsite, the remnants of a fire long extinguished, the ashes scattered by the desert winds. As I approached, the radio crackled again, the voice clearer than ever. "Thank you, you found me." I looked around, the desolation of the campsite a stark contrast to the vibrant life that had once thrived here. The voice seemed to emanate from the very ground beneath me, a spectral presence bound to the land by unfinished business. My heart pounded as I realized I was face to face with the restless spirit of Thomas Mitchell, his soul trapped in the eternal embrace of the desert. "Thomas," I whispered, my voice trembling with a mix of fear and compassion. "I'm here to help you find peace." The air grew colder still, the shadows around me swirling with ethereal light. The figure of Thomas materialized before me, his eyes filled with sorrow and longing. "I've been lost for so long. Thank you for listening." I knelt beside him, extending a hand in a gesture of peace. "What do you need to move on?" Thomas's form shimmered, the edges of his presence fading as if he was slowly dissolving into the night air. "You must remember us. Tell our story. Honor our memory." Understanding dawned on me. The restless spirits were seeking recognition, their stories to be told so that their suffering would not be forgotten. With a heavy heart, I promised to honor their memory, to ensure that Thomas Mitchell and others like him would never be forgotten. As I stood up, the canyon seemed to breathe a sigh of relief, the oppressive cold lifting, replaced by a serene warmth that filled the air. The shadows receded, the darkness giving way to the first light of dawn. Thomas's spirit nodded gratefully before fading into the light, his presence finally finding the peace it had long been denied. I made my way back to Red Mesa, the memory of that night etched into my soul. The experience had changed me, deepening my understanding of the unseen forces that linger in the world and the importance of remembering those who had been lost. The desert, with its harsh beauty and hidden secrets, had revealed its darkest truths, and I had become a part of its story. Years have passed since that fateful night, but the lessons learned remain with me. Sometimes, when the desert winds howl just right and the stars shine brightly against the night sky, I catch a whisper on the airwaves, a gentle reminder that some souls never truly leave, and that their stories deserve to be heard. The whispers of Red Mesa's desert linger on, a testament to the enduring power of memory and the unseen bonds that connect us all. Story number 4. Shadows on Ashford Road. I've always taken pride in serving my community, patrolling the quiet streets of Ashford with a sense of duty and the comforting routine that comes with it. But nothing could have prepared me for the night of October 14th, 1995, a night that would forever blur the line between reality and the supernatural, leaving me questioning everything I thought I knew about the shadows that linger in our world. It was a typical autumn evening in Ashford, a small town nestled in the heart of England. The leaves had turned brilliant shades of orange and red, crunching underfoot as I made my rounds in my patrol car. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of wood smoke and the distant sound of children's laughter echoing from the local playground. As I drove down Ashford Road, a deserted stretch flanked by dense woodlands, I felt the familiar sense of calm that comes with the solitude of night patrol. Around midnight, the town was enveloped in a heavy fog, the streetlights casting long, diffused beams that struggled to penetrate the thick mist. Visibility was low, and the silence was almost oppressive, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves or the distant howl of a stray dog. I was about to make a routine stop at the gas station when my radio crackled to life. "Officer Davies, we have a report of a man in distress on Ashford Road near the Old Miller's farm. Possible hit and run. Can you respond?" I glanced at the clock. 12:15 a.m. Hit and run incidents were rare here, especially on this secluded road. Without hesitation, I turned my car around, headlights cutting through the fog as I headed toward the reported location. As I approached the intersection near Miller's farm, the road became narrower, the trees arching overhead like skeletal fingers reaching out into the darkness. The old farmhouse stood abandoned, its windows boarded up and the gate hanging loosely on its hinges. Parking my car at the edge of the road, I grabbed my flashlight and radio before stepping out into the cold night air. The gravel crunched beneath my boots as I made my way toward the farmhouse, the beam of my flashlight piercing the gloom. I called out, "Hello? Are you okay? I'm here to help." No response. The only sound was the steady drip of water from a leaking gutter and the distant hoot of an owl. I moved cautiously around the perimeter of the house, searching for any sign of the missing man. That's when I saw him, a solitary figure standing in the middle of the road, his back to me. He was dressed entirely in black, a long coat billowing in the gentle breeze, his posture stiff and unyielding. "Sir, can you hear me?" I called out again, taking a step forward. As I approached, the man remained motionless, his head tilted slightly as if listening to something beyond my perception. I reached out, intending to offer assistance, but before my hand could make contact, he vanished, disappearing into thin air as if swallowed by the night itself. Startled, I spun around, my flashlight flickering nervously. There was no trace of him, no footprints, no disturbance in the snow. The fog seemed to thicken, the air growing colder, sending shivers down my spine. I tried to rationalize the encounter, perhaps a trick of the light, a hallucination brought on by exhaustion, but deep down, a gnawing unease settled in my gut. I decided to head back to my car, the weight of the unexplained event heavy on my mind. As I reached the vehicle, a sense of dread washed over me. I glanced up the road, half expecting to see the man again, but there was nothing, just the silent, foreboding woods. The next morning, I reported the incident to my superior, detailing every unsettling moment of the night. His response was cautious but skeptical. There have been no other reports. Officer Davies. Could have been a prank or a misidentification. Let's keep an eye out. But don't let it distract you from your duties. Weeks passed, and the memory of that night began to fade into the background of my daily routine. That is, until one chilly November evening when the past resurfaced with a vengeance. I was driving home after a long shift, the streets of Ashford cloaked in darkness and the occasional flicker of streetlights. The road was as quiet as ever, the fog lingering like a spectral veil. Out of nowhere, I saw a figure standing in the middle of the road. My heart skipped a beat. Was it him? The man in black? I slowed down, the engine idling as I stared at the figure. He was taller this time, his presence more commanding. His eyes a piercing red that seemed to glow in the dim light. Unlike before, he didn't vanish. Instead, he began to move toward my car, each step deliberate and heavy. "Sir, please," I called out, my voice wavering with a mix of fear and authority. "Do you need help?" The man stopped just a few feet away, his gaze unwavering. I reached for my radio, ready to call for backup. But the device was dead, no signal. No battery. Nothing. Panic surged through me as I realized the implications. I tried to start the engine, but the car refused to budge. The wheels stuck in the thick layer of frost. The man took another step forward, his eyes never leaving mine. "You shouldn't have come here," he intoned, his voice a deep, resonant growl that seemed to vibrate through the air. The temperature around me dropped further, my breath visible in the frigid air as an unnatural chill settled over the scene. Desperate to escape, I pounded on the window, trying to get the car to move, but it remained stubbornly immobile. The man raised his hand, and in an instant, the entire area plunged into darkness. My flashlight flickered wildly, the beam dancing erratically before going out completely, leaving me in absolute blackness. A deafening silence enveloped me, broken only by the sound of my own ragged breathing. Then, out of the darkness, the man's growl echoed through the night, a sound that felt like it was coming from the very depths of my soul. I felt an invisible force pressing against the car, a weight that threatened to crush me under its oppressive presence. With every ounce of strength, I willed the engine to start, my fingers fumbling with the ignition as the man's eyes bore into mine. Suddenly, a surge of electricity shot through the vehicle, the dashboard lights flickering back to life. I slammed the accelerator, the car jerking forward just as the man let out a final, anguished howl that seemed to resonate through the entire forest. I didn't look back as I sped down Ashford Road, the figure of the man in black fading into the mist behind me. My mind raced, the encounter replaying in my thoughts like a macabre nightmare. When I finally reached the safety of the town, I was shaken to my core, the reality of what I had experienced refusing to fade away. Determined to uncover the truth, I delved into the history of Ashford Road, the place where I had both lost and found a piece of my sanity. What I discovered was a story of tragedy and unresolved sorrow that had been buried beneath layers of time and silence. Decades earlier, in October 1975, a horrific accident had claimed the lives of several travelers on Ashford Road. A truck had skidded off the icy pavement, crashing into the dense forest, leaving no survivors. The victims had never been found, their bodies lost to the unforgiving wilderness. The incident had left the community in mourning, the road forever marked by the sorrow and loss that had unfolded on that fateful night. Local legends spoke of a restless spirit, a guardian of the forest, bound by grief and anger, seeking justice for the lives lost in the tragic accident. The man in black was believed to be the spirit of one of the victims, forever wandering the road. His presence a reminder of the fragility of life and the lingering pain of untold stories. Armed with this knowledge, I realized that my encounters were more than mere coincidences. They were manifestations of a deep-seated sorrow, a spirit reaching out from the shadows to ensure that the past was never forgotten. The man in black was a symbol of the unresolved pain that lingered in the heart of Ashford, a reminder that some wounds never truly heal. That night, as I lay in bed, the events replaying in my mind, I felt a profound sense of responsibility. The spirit had reached out, not out of malice, but out of a desperate need for remembrance and closure. I vowed to honor the memory of those lost, to ensure that their stories were told and their lives were never forgotten. In the years that followed, I became an advocate for preserving the history of Ashford Road, sharing the stories of the victims and the haunting presence that still lingered in the shadows. The road remained a place of mystery and reverence, the legends woven into the fabric of the town's identity. Each October, as the leaves began to fall and the nights grew longer, I would find myself gazing down Ashford Road, the memory of the man in black a constant reminder of the delicate balance between the living and the dead. Sometimes, when the fog rolls in thick and the wind whispers through the trees, I catch a glimpse of a shadowy figure standing at the edge of the road, his red eyes watching, ensuring that the past remains honored and the stories of those lost continue to echo through the night. Story number 5. Echoes of the Abandoned. I've always believed that Chicago's heartbeat pulsed through its streets, its rhythm mirrored in the lives of those who walked them. As a seasoned police officer, I had seen the city's underbelly, its shadows, secrets, and the stories that never made the headlines. But nothing could have prepared me for the night the abandoned Whitaker house reached out to me, dragging me into a nightmare that blurred the lines between reality and the supernatural. It was a cold, rainy evening in late October 2015. The wind howled through the empty streets, carrying with it the scent of wet asphalt and the distant echoes of car horns. I was on patrol in the South Side, a routine night shift that promised nothing out of the ordinary. My partner, Detective Maria Lopez, was handling a call downtown when my radio crackled to life. "Dispatch, this is Officer Reynolds. I'm receiving a distress call from Whitaker House, requesting backup." Whitaker House had been abandoned for decades, a relic of old Chicago with boarded-up windows and an overgrown yard that whispered tales of forgotten times. Local legends spoke of eerie lights flickering in its windows on moonless nights and unexplained sounds that sent shivers down the spines of passers-by. Most dismissed these stories as urban myths, but the urgency in Dispatch's voice left no room for doubt. I grabbed my flashlight, holstered my weapon, and made my way to the address provided. The rain had intensified, turning the streets into slick ribbons of water that reflected the dim glow of streetlights. As I approached the house, the once grand facade loomed ominously against the stormy sky, its shutters banging against the windows like frantic warnings. Pushing open the heavy front door, it groaned in protest, revealing a dark, cavernous interior. The air was thick with dust and the lingering scent of mildew. I called out, "This is Officer Reynolds. Is anyone here?" Silence greeted me, broken only by the relentless patter of rain against the broken panes. I stepped inside, the beam of my flashlight cutting through the darkness, illuminating remnants of a bygone era, faded wallpaper, broken furniture, and shattered glass strewn across the floor. As I moved cautiously through the ground floor, my mind raced with possibilities. Could it be a prank? A lost traveler seeking refuge? Or something far more sinister? The only logical explanation eluded me, leaving me with an unsettling sense of dread. I reached the staircase leading to the second floor, the wooden steps creaking under my weight. The air grew colder, each breath visible in the dim light. My flashlight flickered, casting eerie shadows that danced along the walls, making the house seem alive with unseen presence. That's when I heard it, a soft, muffled crying emanating from upstairs. My heart pounded in my chest as I quickened my pace, ascending the stairs with a mix of fear and determination. The crying grew louder, a plaintive sound that tugged at my conscience. Was someone really trapped here? Or was my mind playing tricks on me? I pushed open the door to a large, empty room, the source of the crying nowhere to be seen. The room was sparse, with only a single rocking chair positioned in the center. The chair moved gently, swaying back and forth as if an invisible hand guided it. I approached cautiously, every instinct screaming to turn back. But something compelled me to stay. Standing beside the chair, I felt an icy chill wash over me, the temperature dropping sharply. My flashlight flickered again, and in that brief moment of darkness, I saw her, a figure clad in a flowing white dress, her face obscured by shadows. She stood motionless, staring directly at me with hollow, lifeless eyes that seemed to pierce through my very soul. "Leave now," her voice echoed, a haunting whisper that reverberated through the room. I stumbled backward, my mind reeling. "Who are you? What do you want?" The figure remained silent, her presence oppressive and sorrowful. Suddenly, the rocking chair stopped, the air thick with an unbearable cold. I reached for my radio, my fingers trembling, but it fell from my hand, shattering on impact. Panic surged through me as the room seemed to close in, the walls pulsating with an unseen force. Desperate to escape, I turned and fled down the stairs, the crying and whispers chasing me through the darkened halls. The front door slammed shut behind me, plunging me into darkness. I pounded on the door, shouting for help, but my pleas were swallowed by the storm outside. Hours passed in a state of heightened fear, the night stretching on interminably. Exhausted and on the brink of hysteria, I collapsed onto the floor, the rocking chair's gentle sway a constant reminder of the unseen presence that haunted me. Sleep was impossible, my mind tormented by visions of the ghostly figure and the relentless cries that echoed in my ears. When dawn finally broke, the storm had subsided, leaving behind a quiet stillness that felt both peaceful and foreboding. I struggled to my feet, the exhaustion weighing heavily on me, and made my way to the front door. To my relief, it opened easily, allowing the first light of day to flood into the house. As I stepped outside, the rain had ceased, replaced by a gray, overcast sky that threatened more storms. I pulled out my phone, trying to make sense of the night's events. But when I checked the call log, there was no record of the distress call from Whitaker House. It was as if the entire ordeal had been erased from existence. Shaken to my core, I contacted Detective Lopez to report my experience. She listened in disbelief, her skepticism wavering as I described the haunting encounter. Together, we decided to conduct a thorough investigation of the house, uncovering old records and speaking with local historians who had long dismissed the supernatural tales as mere folklore. What we discovered was a tragic story buried in the annals of the town's history. The Whitaker family had perished in a fire on that very night, a devastating loss that had left the community in mourning. The house had been abandoned shortly after. The spirit of the mother, Eleanor Whitaker, rumored to haunt the premises, her grief and sorrow binding her to the land she once called home. Understanding the depth of her torment, we knew that the spirit had reached out for help, seeking closure and peace that had eluded her in life. Determined to assist, we organized a memorial service, inviting the community to honor the memory of the Whitaker family and acknowledge the lingering presence of Eleanor's spirit. On the night of the service, we gathered in the main hall, the air filled with the scent of candles and the soft murmur of prayers. As we lit the candles and offered our respects, the atmosphere shifted, the oppressive cold lifting, replaced by a serene warmth that filled the room. The rocking chair remained motionless, and the crying ceased, the whispers transforming into a gentle sigh that carried away the last vestiges of sorrow. In that moment, I felt a profound sense of peace. The weight of the night's horrors finally lifted. The spirit of Eleanor Whitaker had found the closure she so desperately sought. her presence no longer a source of fear but a reminder of the enduring power of love and remembrance. We left Whitaker House that night with a newfound respect for the unseen forces that dwell within the shadows of our world. The experience had changed us, deepening our understanding of the thin veil that separates the living from the dead and the importance of honoring the past to ensure peace in the present. Years have passed since that haunting night, but the memory remains vivid in my mind. Sometimes, when the wind whispers through the trees and the rain begins to fall, I catch a glimpse of a figure in white, standing at the edge of the forest, her eyes filled with eternal sorrow and gratitude. The echoes of that night serve as a chilling reminder that some stories never truly end and that the spirits of the past continue to watch over us, seeking solace and closure in the shadows of their forgotten lives.